Thank you everybody for joining this workshop put on by the PreSales Collective. Going to be led by David and myself. We're both really excited to be here and really excited to share this content and change the game for how SEs demo. David, do you want to start out with a little intro about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is David Cavi. I'm a SE over at Salesforce. So it's great to be with everyone here today. I'm not overly comfortable with Zoom, so there may be some awkward moments as I click around and get comfortable with where to share things. But it's great to be with you guys here and to kind of share a little bit of what we're doing with OBS, just ramp up some of those virtual presentations a bit.
And then I'm Tanner. I'm a solution engineer over at VMware. Been doing the role for about a year and just looking for any way to level up my presentation skills or find an excuse to buy cool toys and mess with cool applications like OBS Studio. So the way that this workshop got put together originally was the PreSales Collective put out a post on LinkedIn saying, who's doing some cool tech things to level up their presentations? And then David here posted, oh, I've been using OBS Studio. And me, being somebody that follows a bunch of game streamers, messaged him saying, tell me more. Because it's cool to see what video game streamers use OBS for. So being able to use that in a demo environment seemed like a game changer. So upgrading your setup, why even bother? I'll kick you a scenario. You're on the customer side. I want you to pretend that you're a customer. You've listened to vendor after vendor give demo after demo, and you've seen the same recurring things. You've seen the potato webcam where you can't even tell what you're looking at, or maybe even no video at all. You've heard the microphone that you need an advanced translator to even decipher the words that are coming out of their mouth. And you just sit there all day and you get that Zoom fatigue listening to person after person. And then let's say somebody like David here pops in. He's going to share his screen.
Give me one moment here. Switch the camera. Here we are. And now when we join, we're able to use some fancy transitions, able to really engage our audience as we're demoing to them. Just recently, I was on a call where this exact scenario had happened. We had several customer that had several vendors in front of them over the course of a few days. Immediately upon joining the call, we immediately had set ourselves apart just by some simple differentiation, in the way that we presented the video across the virtual channels there. I will be taking you guys through a full setup of the scenes as well that I have set up here for OBS, and a little bit about how we can actually get all of you guys set up with that as well here in just a minute.
Yeah, and you all know as well as we do that the information that you're presenting, the way that you present it is just as important. So being able to show them that view of everything in their face, exactly how it would appear in a real environment, is huge in making sure that they see the value in your product. And then I'm going to go ahead and share again and show off some of the more playful things that you can do. Let's say that you're in some kind of customer engagement and you are sharing your screen. Maybe you want to make it smaller. Maybe you want to take your face out of there. Maybe you want to make a really big point in your demo and you want a sound effect. This is a bunch of stuff that you can do with this program that can be an absolute game changer for your demos. And like David said, we're going to show you how to set it all up and make it work.
Before we do that as well, just a quick highlight there on
wow.
I love that. I love that. I haven't taken it quite as far as the animations yet on my end, but during that RFP cycle, some of the things that we ended up engaging with is, for those of you who have been in RFPs before, most often you're held at arm's reach before you get to the customer. So one of the reasons that we wanted to leverage this OBS tool was that this was our first impact, our first impression with this team of decision makers. So literally the first 10 minutes of our demo ended up being taken up by, discussing OBS and how we were leveraging this technology as, an organization. And I really think that the relationship that we built there with that C-level, who are looking at it and saying, not only are, you as an organization innovating the products that you're bringing, out to market for us, but you're also innovating in the way that you're selling to us and the way that you're engaging with us. It really kind of changed their mindset with how they were engaging with us, and it allowed us to turn that, arm's length RFP relationship and start building a bit of a connection there. Just leveraging the first few minutes of our demo time, which, as an SE, of course, we don't want to give up that valuable time, but it did contribute to the overall health of the deal. So,
And so for today, we're going to go through a few different things. First off, why should you care? We've touched on it a little bit, but we're going to dive a little deeper in who this workshop is for and how different audiences can take advantage of what we're going to talk about. We're going to give a brief intro into what OBS is and some of the basics of how to set it up. And then we're also going to run through some typical setups that you might want to use for a demo. So maybe 3 or so general setups with different views of you and whatever you're trying to show off. And then we're also going to run through some of David and myself's equipment recommendations and give you some justification to spend some money. And then we'll tell you where to go next to learn more, because we tried to cover as much stuff that made sense to cover, but there's an infinite rabbit hole with OBS Studio that you can go down, and we're going to give you some insight into where to go.
I was going to save this public service announcements for the end as well, but just when I logged in and saw all the different gallery views coming in, we clearly have some members that are leveraging some pretty amazing setups. So I'm going to take some names down and ping a few folks that I think may have a bit more OBS experience than I do, because I've got some questions. So
yeah,
stay tuned.
As
maybe we can get a part 2 out of someone here.
Oh, I hope so. And at any point, we're going to stop and ask for questions. So if you all want to ping us in the chat or talk to us about any questions that you have, then definitely feel free to interrupt us. David, I think this one's you.
Yeah, definitely. So I think I covered a good portion of this here, apart from the differentiating yourself from the competition, just showing up, being a little bit visually different. A few things. So obviously when folks are evaluating, the tool that I'm demoing, Salesforce, it's often, we're looking at a desktop view and a mobile view. So just being able to create some scenes that allow me to present both of those views to a customer at the same time can be really useful. For me, and specifically, I've really started using OBS in very tactile ways. That's actually a great question in chat, Josh, and I've looked into it, but I haven't found it yet. I think you could by just doing a little screenshot and then sharing that into OBS. But so being able to build that connection with the customer and being able to differentiate ourselves. So having those two views, for instance, the comments from the customers are, every vendor tells me that I can view this in 2 different devices. You're the first one that showed me live both of those devices working. And right in a simple view, something like this allows me to do that. I apologize, my phone is not connected because I do have a few devices pulling on the MacBook Pro right now. So we're just going to leave it a little bit easier on the CPU usage there. But just a simple view like that, being able to put those in really differentiates and helps you stand out during those sometimes long demo hours. And then the connection building as well. So one of the most popular views that I'm in is obviously just a simple desktop view where I'm sharing my screen and we're walking through, here we're looking at a demo of Sales Cloud. But for instance, I can also demo in this view as well. So for those times where I'm showing something on screen and the folks that are in the room, start that organic conversation, I'm not stuck behind this faceless desktop view. I can quickly zoom out. I can join the conversation, interact with what's happening. And the reaction from the room is actually quite powerful when you make that very small change. Folks will reword questions. I've had, C-level asking one of his colleagues something live, and just by me zooming out, he actually paused, set the frame, and we uncovered an entire other area of the business that he was looking to address as well. And all of that because it felt like I kind of re-entered the room and I stepped out from behind the screen to join that conversation. And then, of course, if we're moving away from conversation for any length of time, I can jump right back to here and be fully engaged with them before moving back into my demo. And those are just 3 super simple scenes. We're going to set a couple up today with you guys, but Just helps me explain those ideas better, differentiate, and then build that connection. Back to you, Tanner.
Yeah, and one thing you had told me about, David, was that some customers would even take you aside and be like, demo aside, customer conversation aside, how did you do that? And those little things outside of business that you can bond and rapport over with a customer, that alone goes a huge way towards making them more likely to want to do business with you. And you get to have more fun doing the job.
Absolutely.
So who this is for? A few different people. The first is pretty obvious, that professionals in a customer-facing role. We've beat it to death at this point as to the kind of use cases and why this is important. Tinkerers. If you're somebody like me, I mentioned at the beginning that I love watching video game streamers and seeing all the cool setups that people do with OBS Studio. If you want an excuse to play with a bunch of cool toys and really build the perfect demo, then you may be interested. And then at the end, more of the lighter user, even if you don't want to take on the full OBS Studio repertoire that David and I are showing off, you can definitely still take away some good tips for increasing your production quality. At the end, we're going to talk about some of our audio and video recommendations to level up your webcam and your microphone and all that. And little things like that go a long way towards making you look more professional, because we spend a lot of time for clothes and doing our hair and looking real nice in person. Yet on video, most of us just settle for our built-in webcam and then our Apple earbud microphones. So definitely a lot of people that this is good for. So what is OBS Studio? OBS Studio stands for the Open Broadcaster Software and is a free and open source software for video recording and live streaming. More importantly though, it's free. And really at its core, all OBS Studio does is it takes in inputs, does whatever you want with it, and then puts out an output. So those inputs could be your video feed, your desktop feed, an application feed, anything that you want to incorporate into how you're presenting these ideas. OBS just takes in information, you configure it, and then it outputs information. And you can create some of the scenes that David and I have talked about and do a bunch of really cool stuff. And most commonly, it's known for video game streaming. David and I were also talking about, if you go looking up OBS Studio Sales Engineer or OBS Studio Demo, you're not going to find much. But if you go look up OBS Studio Streaming, you're going to find an insanely large rabbit hole of avenues to go down, because OBS Studio and programs like it are huge in the video game streaming community. So where to get it? I'm going to go ahead and jump over to here. Weirdly enough, a lot of people have asked about, where do we find OBS Studio? It is as simple as Googling OBS Studio, going to the website, and downloading it. And like I mentioned before, it's free. So if you just want to get it to tinker with it and see what it's about, then you do you. And then once you have OBS Studio, you're going to install it. And then we will get to a point where we see something that looks a little bit like this. This is OBS in its most basic form. We see a couple different things. We see a video feed, and then we see a couple different sections where it looks like we can configure some stuff. And we'll get into those in a minute. But in its more complicated form, OBS Studio might look a little more something like this. And there's no need to get intimidated. There's a lot of moving pieces in here of, this is my setup with my different scenes and sources and all of that jazz. But we're going to start from the beginning, and we're going to get to roughly about this point. So let's start with the basics. Basic OBS Studio. You know what? Do that one. Sometimes it's tough to make up my mind. So the first thing is in the bottom left here, we have scenes. So we've talked about how you can configure this in any way that you want, and each scene is one of those configurations. So in my case, I might have a scene for just my webcam. I might have a scene for me showing off a PowerPoint presentation, or maybe showing off a PowerPoint with my face in it, or maybe showing off the PowerPoint with a background of my face in it, or just the plain one. And each of these scenes is one of these different setups. Then over here on the right, we have Start Virtual Camera. This is the most important part for using this in something like Zoom. Traditionally, OBS Studio is meant for streaming, and you would hook it up to Twitch or YouTube or wherever you're trying to stream, and then it would take the feed directly from OBS. What the virtual cam is it takes whatever OBS is outputting, and it makes it into an output that replicates a webcam. So for all intents and purposes, Zoom views this right now as a webcam. And then whatever I choose to do with it from there, I can do. And you can mess with the different settings in Zoom as far as how you want to share it, whether it be just like a webcam or if you want to share it as if you're sharing your screen, the choice is yours. And then you can configure it with whatever conferencing tool that you use. Then over here, we have sources. And this is the meat and potatoes of setting up everything in OBS. If we break it out a little bit further, we're going to see a few different options. And we're not going to cover all of these today because we can't cover everything. And we're going to go through some of the basics. David, I know I've been talking for a while. Do you have anything to add at this point?
No, that's perfect. Any questions from anyone? I see a question there. Green screen is not something that I've jumped into yet. I've got a lighting investment to make next. That's next on my list. And then I'll be jumping into green screen stuff. But if there's any other questions, love to field those. And then if not, I'm happy to share my screen and walk through how to set up a couple of basic scenes.
Mm-hmm. Well, before we jump to yours, David, I did want to highlight the ones that we're going to be talking about mainly. The first one is display capture, and that's about as basic as it sounds. You're capturing a portion of your display, and we'll jump in a minute and see what that looks like. Video device capture, that is taking in something like a webcam feed or a camera hooked up to a capture card or whatever it might be. And then the third one is the scene source. And this is where you can take an entire scene and put it inside of another scene. And I'll show off a little bit where that comes in handy. But for now, let's jump into OBS Live. If you give me a second. The irony of demonstrating OBS is that to screen share OBS, we need to use the traditional Zoom screen share. So give me 1 second. Okay. You can hear me, right? I had to switch over my microphone outside of OBS.
Yes, sir, we can.
All right. So some of the basics of OBS using this in action are whenever we do want to pull in a source, we are just going to add that source, and then it's going to pull in whatever information that we want it to pull in. So I could have it pull in one of my monitors, I could have it pull in the other monitor, and then from there, we can play with the scaling and do whatever we want with it. And then if we wanted to pull in a video capture device, like my camera hooked up to a capture card, then we can pull that in, scale it, do whatever we want with it. And then some of these other things that we're not going to go too in depth with, you can mess with text and add whatever you want to add. And then same as the other stuff, scale it, put it wherever you want it. And then lastly, I talked about putting a scene inside of another scene. So I could pull that entire scene that I just made into another scene and mess with it all embedded in one place. And this could be useful if you had a couple of basic scenes and then more complicated scenes that built off of those basic scenes. This could save you a ton of time and hassle with setting it up and makes for some pretty cool stuff that you can do. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and hand things over to David.
I'm on mute. Apologies. Can we all see my screen and can you all see me?
I see your OBS.
Excellent. Okay, perfect. So before we hop in and do a quick setup so that everyone can leave with a little bit of a tangible takeaway of how to take this and actually implement it, my goal here is for everyone to see the setup kind of end to end. It's a little bit like a cooking show, so I'm going to go grab some images that are already on my desktop, obviously. So build that in when you think about the time needed to create it. But this is something that I use, these few scenes that we're going to build, use it on every demo. I literally, get here in the morning, I open up my OBS, it automatically connects to my cam that I've got set up here. I've got a tool on my iPad that's already connected. So there's no pre-demo setup. There's nothing that needs to be configured for each particular demo. Obviously, you can take it that far with OBS if you'd like. You can have green screens, as we've been chatting about in chat. You can step out of slides and point at things, behind you on the screen. You can do all kinds of neat things. But my focus and goal here is really that more of us can just get online with this stuff, have our labels up here, have a nicer desktop view, and being able to transition through a few scenes. So we're going to go ahead and navigate up to the scene collection here, and we're just going to create a new scene, and we're going to quickly walk through, how to get everyone up and running with some of these scenes here. So we're going to start out here with this blank, kind of OBS setup here. And as I mentioned, it's going to be a little bit like a cooking show, but there's not too much here that we're going to do that isn't easy to kind of get set up. So we're going to start with our camera. So I'm going to grab our video capture device. I'm just going to call this Canon. I'm currently using a Canon EOS Rebel T5i that my wife had purchased a few years ago to take photos, and I'm not sure that we ever actually did that with it. And it was laying around the house, so I scooped it up in order to use it for my OBS setup. And I just use a free plugin that Canon has online in order to turn it into a webcam. As you can see, lighting is the next thing. If it's not sunny outside, my lighting's a little bit dim, but we're going to get there. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to set this scene up, and we've got our camera in here. I can start virtual camera right here, and I can start screen sharing this out via Zoom if I want to, no issues. Actually, I can keep that on so that we can see it there too. What I'm going to do now is add that label, and we want to use that scene logic when we're creating things here, so that as your use of OBS grows, you're kind of creating it in a scalable way. So we're actually going to create a new scene for that label because we're going to want it to show up in a few different places. So I'm going to go ahead and create that new scene. Going to grab an image, and apologize. This is where that cooking show part's going to come in, because I do have, I've already created that label. I do have this already created here, but basically we've created a nice little branded label in Photoshop, and we're just going to go ahead and pop that onto the screen. And now that's an additional layer here that we can see listed under my sources. We can make that a little bit smaller. I love to have my name in lights, but I don't need it to be that big. And then we'll go ahead and add our label, our name here. That seems to be standard these days. And of course, I've got a custom color already loaded in there, but ping your marketing folks to get your branding. And then we can drop my label on top of this as well. So now we've gone ahead and created a label scene, and we've created this scene, and I can transition back and forth. So we've got two scenes here. Each one of these is independently looking at the sources for each scene. So this one just has this. So as Sandra mentioned, I can pull in a scene here. So now I'm going to add a scene, and I'm going to grab this label scene, and I'm going to add that in. And now I've got my label and my camera scene kind of set up. So that's as quick as that is. So if that's all you want to do to amplify your online, demos, you just want to add your name, maybe your company logo, like that's all you got to do. Every day, come in, turn on your OBS, hit start virtual camera, point this to your Zoom. Once you've done it once, it defaults to it. And you can literally go live with just, this simple thing here. The next thing, if you're looking to kind of take it up to the next level, is obviously for that desktop screen share as well. So we're going to add in another scene here, and we're going to create that desktop view. And this is where we're going to leverage the display capture. I'll title this desktop. Oh, my OCD is going crazy, but I'll clean this all up later. And then again, we're just going to transform this to fit to screen. This isn't my normal setup, so all of my resolutions are slightly off, but you can see we can click to drag here. You'd probably want to go and address that and just change the resolution real quick in there. But we'll make that work like that for now. And now again, if I'm looking to add in any additional items there, let me see if this makes that screen share a little easier.
Staring into the infinite abyss.
And I was always wondering if there's a way to make that easier on the audience to view, but I'm not sure there is. So, and what we're going to do is we're actually going to do something a little bit different here. And I want to highlight this because my goal here is to end up with a little circle image of me in the corner. And there's a few little things that you got to do here that can take you a little bit of time to figure out. So step one is, it seems like I could just reuse this Canon capture device that I've added already, but I'm actually going to re-add it because I want to add that mask to it, and I don't want it to affect my main view. So I'm actually going to call this circle cam. And I'm going to bring in the same device again. I'm going to bring in that web US utility, make this a little bit larger here. And now I'm going to drop that mask around it. So here I'm going to right click. I'm just going to select filter, and I'm going to add in an image mask blend. The circle mask. And again, I understand this is obviously not fast enough for people to click along to. The goal here is that we get through a quick setup, and then obviously we'll provide you guys with lots of documentation to do this afterwards as well. But this is one of the barriers for me, was I'd never just seen it set up before. So now we've grabbed this image as well, and we can drop that over here on the right hand side. And now I've got my circle cam, I've got my desktop being shared. And then again, leveraging that scalability, I can quickly jump in here, add my label, and then have my label show up here as well. Maybe I'll just adjust my circle cam a little better. And now I can quickly transition from here. I can jump into a desktop view where I'm down in the corner, and then back up again to a main view there. So just a really quick, easy setup. There are so many different things that you can do with this. You can add frames, for example, if you wanted to around your camera. That would be just as simple as adding an image and dropping that in on top of that. And that could just add a little bit of additional color to the screen that you're presenting. So I've got a camera ring here that I've got. And again, this is just simply a PNG. So it's a totally transparent image. And then I'm just controlling layers as I would in something like Photoshop, if you're familiar with that tool. I'm just controlling layers and visibility out. So we can see that ring is actually sitting on top now. So I'm going to jump down in here, and I'm going to drag that circle frame under the label, and it updates for me there. I'm going to pause. I know if no one has to come off mute, but if there are any questions in chat that I've missed or anything that people are curious about, I'm happy to pause and answer any questions as well.
Yeah, we've had a few questions come into chat. I've been answering it in chat, but just to highlight some of them, minimum computer specs for running OBS Studio.
Okay, that's a great question. So we'll see here that I'm running at about 12% of my CPU. I'm also only running 30 FPS, so I'm trying to push as little as I can out, and also running light scenes where I can. I'm running a MacBook Pro right now with 32 gigs of RAM in it, and it does do okay. I have colleagues that I've attempted to get set up with this that are on MacBook Airs, and it can cause some issues with those. So things like cooling fans underneath can help, but you want a decent system for something like this.
Mm-hmm.
And Tanner, if you know specific stats, please share. I don't know specific. I just have something beefy.
Yeah, admittedly, I'm a little bit disconnected from this reality because I'm playing on my gaming computer. So my CPU usage is at like 2%. But the nice thing is, since it is free, if you just want to download it, try it out, see if it works okay on your computer, then you don't pay a penalty by paying for a product that you're not going to use. And let's see some other questions that are in chat. Somebody asked about whether you can capture a specific window instead of the entire screen, and yes, you can. Let's see. Let's see, wanting to create a separate scene. Yep. Somebody's asking about if we share, let's see. For the actual screen share, do you typically share your entire desktop or projector mode?
So I traditionally share my entire desktop just because I'm most comfortable knowing exactly what my audience is viewing, but I don't know that that's a best practice. I think most people are showing just a window, and you can do that in OBS as well.
Another good question that we'll get to a little bit later: how do you handle switching between scenes while running a demo? So we'll talk about that later. There's a little tool you could buy called a Stream Deck, or you can just do it with macros, or David has a little bit of a roundabout setup by using his iPad. But we'll cover that in a bit. Best way to find the appropriate audio delay. That one may be a little bit of trial and error on your end, seeing what works. Mine is different because I have my audio set up in OBS. So Zoom for me is pulling audio from OBS as well, although most people be pulling audio directly from their microphone. Somebody wants you, David, to show your most used scenes one more time.
My most used scenes from, okay, excellent. Let me just make sure I'm sharing that content from second camera. Okay, everyone can see that appropriately, correct, on Zoom? Sorry, I don't use it. Are you able to see that, Tanner?
I just see you with your label. Actually, could you show it in the view of OBS?
I can,
Just
yeah.
so that we see what it looks like on the back end.
You guys are still able to see. Let me just screen share here.
Yeah, for anybody watching, using OBS to share OBS is a little bit cumbersome. So that's part of the difficulty here.
Just waiting for that to spin up. So this is now looking at my version of OBS. And my most used scenes are this scene here. Interesting. Okay, so one other item to note, and I'm just going to jump ahead a wee bit because we're going to notice this, is that I'm using something called Updeck, which is just an app installed on my iPad. It's totally free, and each one of those is a button, and it's going to be similar to what Tanner's going to show you at the end. He has a physical version of it, and that's how I'm transitioning these things. And some of the transitions and filters are actually being driven from this iPad. So you can see here that my desktop demo view, so I've got my desktop there, I've got my face, then I'll zoom in, right? So I spent a ton of time here because, to be honest, if folks are on a small monitor, taking up valuable space with this background image, it looks great, but they're here to see software. So I spent a ton of time zoomed right in. And again, I apologize for the endless zoom here. And then toggling back to this one. The other one that I use very commonly is my split screen view as well. Just because I often am demoing, hey, what you see here is available on mobile, being Salesforce platform, etc. So those are my most commonly used. 1, 2, and 3.
Cool. So did you have any other scenes that you were going to show, David, before we jump back to the PowerPoint?
I think that's good. There's a few other scenes that we've got set up, but yeah, let's hop back into the PowerPoint there, and I'm happy to go into bigger depth around some of these animations and things we have set up, but that might open a can of worms here. So
yeah, it's an infinite rabbit hole.
It is. Tinkering is the right word for some of this stuff.
So some of our equipment recommendations. We're going to give 3 different price ranges because not everybody here wants to spend a fortune, and then some people like me might want an excuse to buy fun toys. So if your budget is $50, one important thing is that improving audio, as far as camera versus microphone, is always going to be cheaper than improving video. So one of the best ways to improve your setup right off the bat is just to get a decent microphone. I personally use the Samsung Q2U. It's about $50. People online seem to like it. I kind of want to upgrade because, like I said, I love an excuse to buy cool toys, but it gets the job done and sounds pretty good. And then better lighting. This is one that is basically free, that if you sit near a window or if you have some lights laying around the house that you're not using, lighting can go a huge way towards even making a basic webcam look infinitely better. So if your budget is $50, those are what I would recommend. David, any tweaks to that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't rely on the window. It's awfully gray here today. I don't have lighting set up here yet, and it's not hot. So the Loom Cube, if nothing else, right? Like we can all grab the Loom Cube. I think they're $30 on Amazon or something. That's what I've got to get done.
Next up, for a little bit of a larger budget, and this is from the perspective of more of a tinkerer than somebody that wants to buy it, set it, and forget it. But we're going to carry over better lighting and a better microphone from the previous price range. And then the new addition is interesting. Webcams, for the most part, have been completely stagnant for like the last decade. Webcams are terrible. They haven't gotten much better than they used to be. And I don't exactly know why, but it is the reality. So if you want to get significantly better video, you have a couple options. You could buy a really expensive webcam and get an okay looking image, or you could buy a used GoPro and then get a capture card, and then your computer would treat that GoPro as a webcam. It's super inexpensive because you can find a metric butt ton of different GoPros on eBay used, and then you get a capture card and you're good to go.
And I think
And
someone
then-
mentioned it as well, that the phones, like all the phones have great cameras on it. It'll beat your webcam hands down. And there's all kinds of free tools to stream your phone as your webcam.
Yeah, for sure. The phone route's definitely a little bit more cumbersome, but yeah, if you have a nice phone and you want to use that, fantastic option. And then for a little bit more of the extravagant SKU, microphone wise, if you really wanted to get a really nice microphone, the Shure MV7 is amazing. It's like $300, but it's got USB audio, XLR audio if you want to get all fancy and use an audio mixer, but it sounds amazing. Somebody in the chat even alluded to the Elgato Camlink 4K capture card. I'm personally not using that right now, even though I have it sitting right next to me. It's giving me a little bit of issues and I might have to return it. But as far as getting high quality video fed in from a camera, the Camlink is the way to go. Elgato key lights. This is something used by a ton of different video game streamers, but you basically mount it on your monitor and then it hooks up to OBS and some other stuff that you can configure, and it's the perfect lighting for any kind of stream or demoing or anything. They're like $150, but super elegant and they work super well. Sony ZV-1 camera. This is just what I'm personally using. Although the caveat to this advice, and David can probably add a little more color to this, is if you have a nice camera laying around, see if there's a way that you can use that. I know in David's case, his camera supports Canon's USB utility. So instead of using that camera with a capture card, Canon actually supports a tool so that you can plug that camera in via micro USB and use it from there. And tools like that can save you a ton of money if you're just reusing another camera. Do you have anything to add there, David?
No, that's exactly right. Like across all of these, like I've spent so far, and I've got more to go here, but I haven't spent a ton at all. If you happen to have a camera laying around the house, like a point and shoot, just do some Googling real quick before you spend any money, because a lot of companies are coming out with ways for their cameras to be used in the webcams, obviously in the world that we live today. So, and I know Canon was planning on releasing this and they really ramped it up because of the pandemic. So just do some Googling before you spend cash on connecting your devices.
Mm-hmm. And then the last one is an Elgato Stream Deck. So David uses a little bit of a different setup with his iPad, but for me, I actually messaged him after he showed me all of his OBS Studio setup stuff months ago. I messaged him saying I bought a thing and I bought a little Elgato Stream Deck. So that little picture down there, it's basically a macro pad that you can set with a bunch of custom stuff, and it hooks up to OBS super nicely. So I have, and I'll show it on the next slide, I have all of my scenes set up on here, and I have all of my memes set on another page. So if I want to just play a meme,
that's pretty good.
I've got all that stuff automated, super fun, and just a neat toy to tool with. So where to go to learn more? The scope of this workshop definitely didn't cover everything that OBS Studio has to offer or ways that you could level up your demo. There are definitely some holes in plugins. These are things that you can install into OBS to add functionality on top of what it does by default. You can do a bunch of cool transitions. I showed them off a little bit, but kind of like how I have my little VMware transition. You can set that up. You can set up hotkeys for transitioning between scenes, and then you don't need to necessarily use something like a Stream Deck or David's iPad, audio setup is another entirely huge rabbit hole. Setting up the video is one thing, but setting up the audio is actually pretty darn difficult. It was insane trying to wrap my brain around how the different feeds interact with each other. But if you do want to set up audio, that's something that you can look into. And then for learning more, we talked about it a little bit earlier, but if you go look up OBS demo, OBS sales engineer, OBS pre-sales, you're not going to find anything. But if you go on YouTube and look at what some of the YouTubers do for video game streaming, you're going to find a ton of content. And then per usual, you can hit up David or myself in the Pre-Sales Collective Slack channel. And if you're not in the Pre-Sales Collective Slack channel, then get in the Pre-Sales Collective Slack channel. There's one for tech suggestions where people geek out about a bunch of little things, and you can find us in there. And then that one picture in the bottom right is my Stream Deck. Let me make it a little bigger. So I have all of my scenes set up there so that I can quickly transition from PowerPoint to sharing a Chrome tab to just my camera to making the little circle bigger or smaller, or doing a little Law and Order sound effect. The possibilities are endless. So are there any other questions, either in the chat or anybody want to speak up?
Any plans to do a follow-up?
David, you want to take that one?
That's a great question. Probably not something that I'm looking to take on right now, just with a few other projects that I have on the go, but I would certainly love to hear more from the community on how we can leverage these tools and make them better, and maybe even create some assets that we can share out with each other.
Yeah, it can all go down in the Tech Suggestions Pre-Sales Collective channel.
And are we going to get a copy of this video? Because I've got memory retention of goldfish.
Yeah, this video will be posted to the Pre-Sales Collective YouTube channel, probably in a few days.
And again, hit us up in Slack if you have one-off questions, even if it's, hey, I'm adding a scene and I'm getting an error. I learned all this stuff by trial and error. So there's a chance that if you're getting an error, I've probably got it. So feel free just to mention me or Tanner in Slack while you're going through setup as well.
Hey, Tanner or David, how do you guys monitor your audience while you're doing your presentations at the same time without obviously double displaying them? Do you have a trick on that?
I don't. I find myself in a black hole a lot of the time. There's a few times for high stakes that I'll actually log into the meeting twice on a second iPad that I have, and that is just pinned to the conference room view of my customer. That's the best that I've had, and I just show up twice in the Zoom.
Mm-hmm. And then whenever you do share screens in Zoom, you do get the little pop out thing. So I'm able to see whoever's talking right now just fine. But it is a little bit more cumbersome than the traditional just screen sharing via Zoom. But OBS was never intended for the faint of heart.
Well said. Thanks, guys. This is really great. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah, brilliant.
David, I don't know if you see anything else in chat.
I think we're good. Oh, documentation. So I don't have any like formal documentation put together with like a step-by-step, but there are a number of them that have been put together that Tanner's got attached to the end of this deck. There's a couple of YouTubers that do a very slow click through that you could follow, almost exactly the one that I kind of took today. So that's definitely one of them. And then the other thing is we didn't actually get to install OBS today because Tanner and I would have had to wipe our versions of it. But there is actually a wizard that you're going to go through to set up in terms of like selecting all the right things. So the setup guide is fairly straightforward on it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we can definitely loop to that tech suggestions channel. Thanks, folks.
All right. Anything else? I see more stuff popping into chat, but I'm not able to look at it at the moment.
Lots of thank yous. I think we're good.
All right. So just to sum things up, if you want to learn more about OBS and get started, you did the first part in attending this workshop, and then just download OBS Studio, make a few basic scenes to experiment, and then test it out in whatever conferencing app you use and work from there. Thanks everybody for attending, and I think we are all done.